plus ample.
And you can find more information on the Elections Canada webpage.
As I mentioned last week, the panel has a high threshold for intervention. As well, the panel does not monitor individual opinions or perspectives or perceived or public influence. Cependant, il demeure important.
However, it is still important for us to discuss developments in the information environment or intelligence environment because an informed and a resilient public is the best way to fight disinformation.
We are aware of fake news articles and online ads with sensational headlines about Canadian elections that are being linked to websites promoting financial fraud schemes. These fake news articles are being seen on several social media sites. Nous souhaitons rappeler au Canada.
We want to reiterate the importance of being careful and on being vigilant and cyber safe when viewing content online, including election information.
Cyber criminals have become experts at leveraging timely events and using sophisticated techniques to trick people into sharing personal or financial information. This can lead to incidents like phishing scams. The best way for Canadians to protect themselves is to learn how to spot disinformation and scams like phishing. Le site web d'Institution démocratique de
There are several tips and tricks on spotting this type of disinformation on the Government of Canada's Democratic Institutions website.
Also get information and practical advice on how to avoid falling victim to these attempts on CSE's Get Cyber Safe website. Les Canadiens peuvent être assurés que nous
Canadians can rest assured that we have strong mechanisms in place to detect, deter, counter, and disrupt foreign interference.
The panel will continue to meet regularly to be briefed by site. This will be done at least once a week or more often as required. We will continue to safeguard the integrity of this election for all Canadians. Nous continuerons également de communiquer.
And we will continue to provide updates to the media.
Thanks to the efforts of civil society groups, the media, academia, and government departments and agencies, Canadians understand the threats posed by foreign interference to our democratic institutions and processes. I would now like to pass the floor to my colleague Larissa Galadza, who will provide further information on digital transnational repression. Merci.
Thank you, Lorianne. My name is Larissa Galadza, and I am the Director General for Cyber Critical Technology and Democratic Resilience at Global Affairs Canada. One of my responsibilities is overseeing Rapid Response Mechanism Canada, or RRM Canada, which is Global Affairs representative on the Security and Intelligence Threat to Elections Task Force. RRM Canada was established in 2018 as part of Canada's G7 presidency at the time to counter foreign threats to democracies. This includes digital transnational depression, and I'll be talking to you about that today. The RRM's data analysts use open source data and research methods to monitor the global digital information ecosystem for foreign-backed information operations. Let me first describe transnational repression, or TNR, before moving on to its digital form. As Lorianne said, TNR is a form of foreign interference in which authoritarian foreign governments attempt to extend their own domestic repression beyond their borders to intimidate, coerce, harass, harm, and ultimately silence critics or those deemed a threat to their rule. It can take place in a variety of ways. These authoritarian regimes target members of diaspora and exile communities, particularly religious and ethnic minorities, human rights defenders, political dissidents, activists, students, scholars, and journalists. What is important here is that the actors behind transnational repression are foreign governments. We have seen this malign activity from a number of foreign states, and we have seen it around the globe and here in Canada. Now let me talk about how authoritarian foreign states perpetuate transnational repressions through the digital space. This kind of repression can take the form of online harassment and smear campaigns, largely through social media. It can also include doxing, where the private and identifiable information of targeted individuals is put into the public sphere without their consent. The intent is to fuel harassment and physical violence. As with more traditional or physical methods, Digital forms of transnational repression are also used to induce compliance, to silence or discredit individuals, or to retaliate against dissent. And this form of repression is perpetrated through technology. Digital transnational repression is not new to us in Canada. The team at RRM Canada detected this kind of activity in recent years, and we've seen it increasing. In 2023, we informed the public about a targeted online information operation known as spamouflage. Spamouflage is a kind of spamming that hides nefarious content among everyday content to camouflage a hostile intent. Here's how it works. Hostile actors flood the information ecosystem with a large volume of content, such as videos, memes, or text, that discredit or embarrass the targeted individuals. This content is then amplified inauthentically by hijacked or faked accounts, also known as bots, which make this content more visible on social media platforms with the hopes that it will be further shared and engaged with. The operation in 2023 leveraged social media accounts for dozens of members of parliament from across the political spectrum and across Canada to make the content visible. Spam comments claimed that a critic of the Chinese Communist Party in Canada had accused the various members of parliament of criminal and ethical violations. RRM Canada assessed that the likely goal of this operation was, at least in part, to silence criticism of the Chinese Communist Party, to incentivize members of parliament to distance themselves from the critic, discrediting and discouraging wider online communities from engaging with them. RRM Canada also informed the public earlier this month of a new spamouflage operation, which has targeted several individuals in Canada. This new operation employs various tactics to intimidate, belittle, and harass individuals in Canada who are critical of the People's Republic of China. It includes the use of generative AI to doctor existing online content and then amplify it as a way to dox the targeted individuals. This is also the first known instance where the RRM detected spamouflage using sexually explicit deepfake photos to target an individual in Canada. When we see this activity, we take several steps to try and stop it. First off, we work with the National Counter Foreign Interference Coordinator at Public Safety Canada to alert targeted individuals so that they can take the steps necessary to protect themselves. The coordinator also proactively engages with communities and other affected individuals who are at risk of digital TNR. We also alert social media platforms where potentially harmful content about this individual is proliferating and where it may violate their terms and conditions. Decisions about what to do with this content is up to these individual social media platforms. We conduct diplomatic démarches to share relevant information and request that foreign states stop their malign activity. We may also engage other site members as needed, including law enforcement, to take appropriate action. And, of course, we continue to monitor incidents to understand how they are evolving in real time so that we can evolve our response. There are also steps that Canadians who feel they are vulnerable to digital TNR can take to protect themselves. First, they can do things to protect themselves online. Use strong and unique passwords, carefully examine emails or text messages and think twice before opening an attachment or clicking on a link. Avoid using public Wi-Fi networks or Bluetooth, and avoid oversharing personal information online. Second, anyone in Canada who feels they are being targeted can go to police or to CSIS, say they believe the activity against them is transnational repression, and share the information they have. And of course, if someone is in immediate danger, they should call 911. RRM Canada is committed to protecting the integrity of these elections for Canadians and to keeping Canadians informed.
Okay, we will pass on to the question period. I'll start in the room. A reminder for those on Zoom, please use the raise hand function if you have a question. I will start with Emily Hawes from the Globe and Mail.
Hi, thank you for taking our questions. I was just wondering, the social media companies had reached out to Elections Canada, had written back these letters, saying, kind of outlining their policies for the election, including their content kind of moderation policies around the election integrity and things like community notes for X. What do you make of the responses of those letters? And do you think, they are doing enough to guard against, I guess, foreign interference and mis and disinformation?
Maybe I'll turn to you on that one.
Yeah, so not being specifically familiar with the letters that you just outlined, it's very true that the social media platforms have an ongoing relationship with Elections Canada that focuses on issues related to the administration of the election. One of the things that the social media companies do, many of them, that I think is actually quite beneficial is they post good information, squeeze out some of the bad information that is on their platforms as relates to things like when is the election, how do you vote, issues related to that. So those are ongoing relationships. I think for the specifics of your question, I think you'd need to engage with Elections Canada.
And the Liberals are, the calls are mounting for them to drop a Liberal candidate who said that like a Conservative candidate who, the idea of, he said he was joking, and that the Conservative candidate should be turned into the Chinese consulate. He's a Hong Kong dissident. What do you make of this controversy, and do you consider it, for example, transnational repression?
So we're aware of the comments made, and I would say the comments don't fall under the mandate of the panel. The bounty against the other person is an example of transnational repression. The panel and site are monitoring as it relates to the bounty. I will note that the Minister of Foreign Affairs in December 2024 issued a statement deploring Hong Kong's decision to place bounties on the heads of democratic activists, including 2 Canadians. And GAC remains in touch with the 2 Canadians to provide them updates and offer support.
We'll go on to Christopher Nardi from the National Post.
So I just want to kind of piggyback on that. Have you seen efforts, or have you detected efforts from the PRC or their networks to try to coerce the 2 individuals who had bounties put on them, or even online campaigns, anything to try to either discredit them or bring them back to the PRC?
Maybe I'll look to Melissa and Vanessa.
What we saw was the content that was the news of the bounty was sort of re-upped, but we're just watching the open space for anything related to that. So that alone, I think, is a form of coercion. Spreading again the information about the bounty is precisely how malign foreign states seek to silence, harass, and coerce.
Just to be clear on that point, are you seeing an effort to re-up that information coming from what appears to be a state-sponsored network? I just want to clarify. I'll ask another.
Let me get back to you with the answer on that, exactly where we're seeing it from.
And then otherwise, so very early, Ms. Kempton, anyone can answer this, you talked about growing threats against politicians, but I wanted to kind of circumscribe that in terms of time. Have you seen that since the beginning of the election, and of maybe all the phenomenon that you've mentioned, intensification of threats, you've mentioned disinformation, AI manipulation, et cetera, et cetera. What have you seen in particular, maybe possibly sharpen or increase since, I'm forgetting the date, but day 1 of the election?
I don't know that we have seen things particularly sharpen since day 1 of the election. I do think we have seen, certainly over time, the last several months, the last year, I mean, disinformation remains on the rise continually in all aspects of society. And I think we have seen over the last couple of years a rise in threats and in attempts at intimidation of public figures, again, across the political spectrum. Maybe I'll turn to Greg at the RCMP if the RCMP has anything they'd like to add to that.
No, just to say that the RCMP is seized with the, Can you hear me? I can. Yeah. So the RCMP is very well seized with the issue of threats to candidates. To be clear, the RCMP's protective mandate extends to the Prime Minister as well as the leaders of parties with standing in Parliament, and any determination for the extension of protective services is at the discretion of the Minister of Public Safety, that needs to designate an individual for such protection. That said, there is a new program for candidate security that is being led by PCO, and that is meant to address issues such as this, because the RCMP unfortunately cannot be everywhere all at once. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up a bit, you have seen over the past few years issues of intimidation of politicians. It's happened on Parliament Hill, it's happened in ridings. And if you look more generally around the world, you've seen peer countries where issues of tendencies towards violence have been seen. So it's with that in mind that the efforts of the RCMP are applied to, as Greg mentioned, to ministers and leaders of officially recognized parties. And the candidate security program is an additional layer of support that's being provided to candidates of all parties.
David Thurton from CBC.
Good morning, folks. I guess I just wanted to come back to the issue involving Paul Chang. Ms. Kempton, you said that it's not in your purview, but is CITE at least concerned by those comments? And what do candidates do who face similar threats, whether serious or jokingly? What should candidates do if they're in a similar situation where they're being threatened in a similar way? So are you concerned at the very least, and what should candidates do if they're in that similar situation?
So I'd say CITE is concerned about the bounty placed by Hong Kong on Mr. Tay. We are aware of the comments, as I said. In terms of what candidates should do, they should contact police of local jurisdiction in the immediate. They are also able to contact CITE and the RCMP if they have other concerns, and we will look at it from there. Vanessa, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
That's separate. Thank you.
And the candidate who received that threat, Joe Tay, says he fears for his safety. Is the RCMP or any other agency reaching out to contact him?
Greg, would you like to respond to that?
I'd have to get back to you specifically on whether the RCMP has reached out to Mr. Tay. But to reiterate what Johann said, if candidates feel under threat, either immediate or not, I would encourage them to reach out to their police of jurisdiction, as well as the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, so that we can have a combined response to the real and perceived threats that they are feeling.
Jim Bronskill from the Canadian Press.
I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the candidate security program, when it was introduced and what it entails.
Happy to. The candidate security program is a new program that's been developed this year to help support candidates of all parties, both recognized and not recognized, if they feel a threat to their safety. It's intended to provide support for such things like campaign events, and also should they feel a personal threat. It should be noted that it's part of a layered approach. Greg quite correctly noted that if a candidate feels their safety is threatened, reaching out to the police of local jurisdiction should be part of what they do. In addition to that, Elections Canada provides support for things like security alarms in constituency offices. And so what this does is it's just an extra layer of support in addition to, as Greg mentioned before, existing supports directly for, party leaders and ministers.
And maybe if I can interject as well too, beyond the sort of physical nature of the threat that candidates may experience, we also recognize that there can be an online component to this as well. So it's one of the reasons that within the Cyber Center at CSE, we have a hotline available that candidates can contact 24/7 should they experience any cyber threats online.
The Prime Minister indicated today he had recently received a national security briefing in the last day or so, which is perhaps not surprising. I'm wondering if, to what extent you can talk about this, or whether it's within your ambit, whether the opposition leaders have been receiving similar briefings during the electoral writ period.
Well, I can speak to a portion of it, which is that last week, political parties received a security briefing of the threats at the classified level. These are the cleared party representatives of each of the parties. So that briefing took place late last week.
Okay, I'm looking here at Zoom. I don't see any raised hands. Another chance if anyone has a question. Okay. Okay, so Palak, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hi, Mr. Tay said that he's been in touch with the RCMP, but do we know if he's taken advantage of this candidate security program? Is that something that maybe Lori, you can speak to?
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, my question was whether or not Mr. Tay, he says that he's been in touch with the RCMP, but do we know whether he's taking advantage of the candidate security program? I think this might be a question for Ms. Kempton.
Thank you for the question. No, I am not aware. I don't know if he has taken advantage of the program. We'll have to come back to you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions.
Just as a follow-up.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Do you have a follow-up, Palak?
Yeah, thanks, Nadeed. Just can you clarify, is this the candidate security program, is that under PCO or is that the one that's being offered by Elections Canada, or am I crossing my wires here?
It is the candidate security program that we just spoke about is under the Privy Council office. Elections Canada also has a program for candidate security as well.
Okay, I don't see any other questions on Zoom. There's one more question in the room from Christopher Nardi, if you'd like to go ahead.
Arguably so many more, but before I ask the question, do you have on you more data on like the granular of this security program, like how many people rather, how many parties, or should I just put that into the?
If you submit
Gotcha.
that question.
I will not burn that. I'm curious about the social media platforms. A fair number of them have either significantly changed or straight up removed their monitoring or misinformation monitoring programs. I'm thinking of X. I'm thinking of Meta. Has that impacted your ability to monitor that ecosystem? Does that concern you in terms of how quickly and efficiently palpably false information is being addressed?
Maybe I'll start with Larissa and then we'll turn to Al.
It hasn't affected our ability. It just makes our capacity and what we're doing all the more important.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
Just to note that the Canadian Digital Media Research Networks on Friday posted their early assessment of the campaign. As you may know, they provide an assessment of the overall Canadian ecosystem, and that's one of the issues they raised.
And then my other question was in terms of disinformation campaigns that you may or may not have spotted. Has SITE or any government entity asked the platforms to combat or remove any particular networks or campaigns, or since in the last few weeks, even in the pre-writ period, any networks? I saw TikTok, for example, said they'd taken one down back in January, but it was a small one. Have you guys made any similar requests, and was that followed up on or accepted?
Start, Bridget. I don't know if you have anything.
Sure, absolutely. So when we look at the situation of mis and disinformation, we look at it pretty holistically along with our colleagues in SITE. In the SITE contract, it's very much looking at whether or not there are links to foreign interference. And so one way we do that is through our entire mandate within the communication security establishment. So looking at using our intelligence mandate, signals intelligence, to determine if there are foreign links. So that's one aspect of what we do in understanding where mis and disinformation is coming from and attributing it. Separately from that, we do a lot of work to understand how mis and disinformation is propagated online and the tools and techniques used by the cyber threat actors to do that. And we have spent some time in the last couple of years analyzing a lot of those threats. We don't necessarily go directly to the platforms to address those specific issues, but do have discussions with the platforms about the threats that we do see. And so have shared with platforms the concerns that we have in the use of artificial intelligence techniques, for example, both to generate and promote mis and disinformation.
RM Canada has a standard practice of engaging social media platforms when we have identified a foreign connection. So we've done that in relation to Spamouflage. We've done it in relation to the doxing websites we've seen. We did it in relation to the work we did with SITE during the Liberal Party of Canada leadership campaign, and we have done it in relation to this issue of the bounties.
I will do a last call for questions. Oh, there's a question online from Riddhi Kachella from the Hill Times. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I mean, you might have already answered a part of it, but I wanted to specifically ask you about TikTok, since you mentioned threats from the PRC, and in the past we've heard about, how TikTok could kind of be linked to the Chinese government and administration. Is there any concerns about content being like political content on TikTok and how it's influencing people regarding the elections? Thank you.
Bridget.
Maybe I'll just say, as I had just mentioned, we do look at the content of understanding what a particular mis and disinformation issue may be. So we, within this communication security establishment, don't monitor what we see online. So our colleagues, for example, at the GAC-RRM, do monitor for mis and disinformation. But when it comes to particular issues of mis and disinformation and understanding who may be behind a particular campaign, we can and do use our foreign intelligence mandate to inform those connections.
And I would say we see the campaigns across all the platforms, and from the RRM perspective, we don't treat one platform any different from another, and often actually we monitor for cross-platform operations as well.
All right, thank you.
Final question, anybody? Any last call? Emily?
You've talked about engaging the social media platforms. Are you satisfied with how they are dealing with your concerns?
Al, would you like to go first?
So we're pleased that they're engaging with us. that engagement occurs bilaterally and also in a multilateral group. So we're pleased with that part of the engagement. I think it's important to say that the Government of Canada does not provide instruction to social media platforms. Instead, what do we do, and I think Brigitte mentioned it quite properly, is what's provided is a sharing of information. It's more like a clearinghouse. And what we do is we encourage them to enforce their community standards.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Nope, that's exactly correct.
Okay. Vanessa?
I would, I think it's really important to remember that countering disinformation is a whole of society effort. So the questions are focused on what we're expecting social media platforms to do. But Al mentioned earlier that there are other think tanks and enterprises that are looking at this ecosystem. And I would encourage Canadians to also think of themselves as being active participants in there. So if there are concerns from various communities or individuals about information that is perceived to be disinformation, we encourage you to go to the Democratic Institutions website, look at the tools there that are prepared to help you engage with that information. And if you have your own concerns specific to the ability to proceed with this democratic process that are elections, report to the social media platforms. And if you have concerns about specific instances that could be foreign interference, please encourage you to report to site in that regard so we can continue our monitoring effectively.
And maybe if I can add to that too, on that theme of encouraging resiliency and the ability to recognize and understand what may be mis and disinformation. As I mentioned,
all right. I think we've seen enough of this, but I usually don't waste my time or my followers' time with this political charade bullshit anymore. But I'm going to tell you what happened today, okay? So I wake up and I see all these posts about Mark Carney stepping down, Mark Carney quitting, Mark Carney, Section 32 of the Charter Rights, he's ineligible. Okay, here's the facts. And if people don't want to start looking at the facts and want to consume themselves with this back and forth fraud of this political charade, then this will go on until this technocratic state is installed, which is exactly what is happening in the US, Canada, and the entire European Union right now. I wake up to see Carney stepping down, all this shit. It's everywhere. My whole fucking Facebook feed. Based on what facts? Zero facts. You want to know some facts? Since 1931, everything in this land is illegitimate. The parliament is a fraud. We are the ones who allow it to go forward. All of this is provable with documents. Now, we had a very good counter-narrative movement 3 years ago when we locked down that fucking city. But since then, it has become an absolute laughingstock because of things like today. People relying on hopium rather than looking at the fucking facts. The facts show, and I will show you right now, there's a whole timeline, man. A man just died who dedicated his whole fucking life to this. Here's a timeline of everything that has happened on this land since 1627 that proves the fraud. All of it is here on themythiscanada.com. Doug Forrest put his life into this. And what do people do? They read it once, they watch the video, and then they take that information, wipe their ass with it, and flush it down the fucking toilet. So when you're complaining of why we're in this state, when you're complaining of why your children have no fucking future, this is why. Us. We are the fucking problem, not the politicians. The politicians are doing their job very well. The fact that you think they're there for you is blasphemy. It's hopium and it's absolute bullshit. People have worked their asses off and dedicated their lives to proving to you that it is a fraud and that we can prove it. It's all there. And what do people do? Oh, wow, that's interesting. Don't need that anymore. Let's fucking kneel to our masters and think that an election is going to change anything. I am not left. I am not right. Why? Because I have a fucking brain. I'm sick of watching this shit. And I'm glad that I was right today. And he's not going to step down. He's the crown's boy. He's been the banker of the crown. We are not a sovereign nation. Canada has not and never will be a sovereign nation. It is a corporation, and I will show you that as well for people who don't want to believe it. You go to sec.gov. Here, I'm going to walk you through it so you don't think I'm just showing you some fucking thing. sec.gov. Okay, we go to menu. We put in Canada in the all caps. Why? Because it's a corporation, just like you and your birth certificate. There, where do we go? Company information. Oh, state location, DC. Business address is the Canadian Embassy. This is a corporation. It has never been a country. It never will be. See this 88888 over here? That is all foreign governments, what they're classified as. Let's click that. Oh, look at this. Canada. Government of Belize. Government of Jamaica. Republic of Italy. They're all on here. So you want to start looking at facts? Look, Quebec. Why does it not say province of Quebec? Why does Quebec have its own parliament and not a legislature? Because they're their own nation. Same reason they didn't adopt the Charter of Rights. They're still on the Bill of Rights. It's all on here. And people see this, they understand it, and what do? They toss it aside like it fucking means nothing. You want to know why we're doomed? Ourselves. It's time for people to wake the fuck up. Have a good day. Stop believing in fucking false bullshit. Use the facts we have to make the change. Nobody else is going to do it for you.